Hello everyone, welcome to the Mastering App Development with the Application Wizard and Designer. This is part of our 2024 TechWorks series of sessions that we put on. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Raymond. I've been a developer over at InsightWorks for 15 or more years. Most of the time I just work on Warehouse Insight and the Order Fulfillment Worksheet, but I do have some ownership of license plate management and some of the other common core that we use across our products. As discussed, though, today we're just going to go over what the Application Wizard is. We're going to look at some of its benefits and limitations really quickly. And then most of our time is going to be spent creating a worksheet application using the Application Wizard. And we're also going to use the Application Wizard to create a lookup and document type application. When that's all said and done, we're just going to briefly look at how you could extend some of the applications a little bit further. And it should be a fairly easy session to follow along with. So, what is the Application Wizard? Essentially, it's just a page in Business Central, a wizard type page, that will guide you through a series of prompts on what type of application you want to create. And at the end of the wizard, it will have created an application for you that you can then use on the handhelds, just like an application you might have created from scratch. It uses some predefined events and code underneath the hood to accommodate the generic wizard portion of this, right? So, there's going to be a common set of code behind the scenes, we'll call it magic code, okay? And it also uses a series of base applications that are the templates basically for these new applications that are getting created. So we have like a worksheet based application, a document type based application, and a lookup type based application. So depending on what you're choosing to build, it'll take that, copy it, insert a bunch of code based on your requirements, and then it will copy and clone that and make that as an available application after the fact for you to then extend a little bit further. It's not too bad. Okay, so benefits and limitations of the wizard. Let's go over the benefits first, right? So the biggest one is there's no AL code required, right? Or at least at the base level or once the wizard's done, there's no AL code required. It doesn't mean you might not have more, but we'll talk about that. So for a lot of people, that's a big selling feature, right? So especially for, say, like a consultant or somebody that doesn't have has limited development experience, they can use this wizard to quickly create an application. In a lot of cases, it's a fully functional application. But even if it's just a proof of concept, so maybe you're on a client site or, you're in your hotel room, you quickly want to be able to go back the next day, to the client and say, hey, look, yeah, I made this sample purchase return order application, or I've made an application that allows you to build sales orders from scratch, right? You can use this wizard to guide you through those steps and, quickly get that pushed out for you, within minutes even. On the flip side, though, there are some limitations, right? So we talked about the magic code, right? So in order to make these generic applications and, accommodate pretty much any table combinations you can imagine, we have some very specific code on the backside that's using things like record refs and field refs and item lookup tables and calculations and stuff, where it's trying to determine the best fields to use or to how to do an update onto a line, that kind of stuff. So it's not always that easy to take those a series of generic events that are being used and fit them into maybe what your exact requirements are going to be, right? So take an example like, updating a line. Sure, we know what your quantity fields are going to be and stuff like that. But if you need to do something more beyond that, like, say, setting an alternate unit measure or, setting item tracking and you got extra fields on the reservation entry that we don't know about, it may not always be able to use the generic events, in which case you might have to move away from using the generic stuff and go either to a completely custom app or, tweak some of the code that's happening in there. We'll kind of look at some of those options at the end. And again, it cannot easily update the application after it's created. So once the wizard's done, it's going to have an application, it's going to create it for you, and it's going to be in your application list. But you can't then take that same application you just created and feed it back into the wizard and make changes to the wizard and then have it, update your custom app. Once the wizard's done, you're on your own. You have to actually then, manage the blocks yourself or the code and that kind of stuff. Someday down the road, I'm not promising anything at this point, but we may have the ability to feed, a custom application back in and, tweak it at that point. But as of right now, you can't do anything like that. And touched on and above, while you may not need AL code, you may still end up needing it. Like a prime example, let's say you need to do posting. Well, the wizard doesn't know how to do posting. It doesn't know what your requirements be for the posting coding and that kind of stuff. So you might add a new menu option for posting once the wizard's done. So you add this post menu option, but then you're going to need an AL extension coding to process that post request. Yeah, you can see it's on the page here. So common features across, whether it's a worksheet application or a document or a lookup list kind of application, there are some pretty common elements that you're going to see on the wizard. So when we're going through the wizard pages, it's going to ask for a lot of these common things, and you're going to see them across both apps. And we'll look at them each one as we go through. But yeah, like landing page menu icon. So do you want to be able to launch your application from the landing page? The line actions, documents and worksheets, they have the same kind of thing. So you want to be able to update a line, delete lines, insert lines. Are you going to be requiring bins? Are your items going to be item tracked? Or more specifically, are your items, when you're modifying or inserting lines, are they going to ask for item tracking? Header and source line tables, same thing. You get header and line columns associated with the tables that you're choosing for those two data sets. We have fine line templates. We have application menus within each application, things like close. And then line value manipulation, we'll kind of look at that at the end as well. So let's get into the bulk of our presentation, which is actually using the wizard to do things for us. So we're going to be using it to create a worksheet application. So first thing is it's based on the worksheet or the base worksheet application. Okay. And that's typically used for things like journal lines. So, item journal, it's not limited to it. Like obviously you can use it whenever you want. Another alternate example might be adding sales lines. So dummy sales lines. And then at the end, having a button that says, create sales order from these sales lines as an example. You can flip that around. You can create a sales order first, then add the lines, But it's easiest to think of the worksheet as being, a journal within Business Central. Doesn't have to have a lookup associated with that journal, but you can, right? So an example of using a lookup would be selecting the batch before you get into the journal. Okay, so let's look at Business Central just quickly to show you what the base template application looks like. So if you go into your Warehouse Insight applications, all right, so you'll see what you normally expect. And if you're part of the application development class that we put on, you've gone through actually how some of these things work and all that stuff. But there are three specific apps that are unique to the application wizard. And that's this base document, base lookup, and base worksheet. Okay, so these are what gets cloned by the application wizard when you choose whichever one of those types of applications you're trying to create. If I design it, not to scare anybody on this session, but you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Like there's a bunch of blocks that have already been added in here, and they're all specifically added for handling generic, we'll call it in here worksheet type activities. So scanning bins, scanning items, changing quantities, inserting lines, deleting lines. There's all these blocks that are already there for you. Okay. We're going to come back to this at the end. We're just going to just show you that's what's being used. But let's look at actually using the wizard now to create a worksheet application. So first thing you want to do is go launch the wizard. So it's the Warehouse Insight application wizard. Oops. Let's create application. All right, so that one there. And you can see on the first page is wizard. It's just going to ask you what type of document are you creating, or sorry, not document, what kind of application are you creating? So worksheet, a document, or lookup list. And then just, whether you want to, have a lookup list that's associated with the document. So we don't often have to create lookup lists anymore. It used to be, 3 separate processes. We then combined lookup lists into being as part of the flow for worksheets and documents. So, lots of times if you're just creating those 2 types of documents, you're never going to have to create a lookup list separately after the fact. For those of you that attended one of Mark's AI sessions, there was another flow in here where you could have an AI prompt as well. So you could build your application based on like a chat GPT type interface where you do the prompt, and you could say like, create me a sales order application that allowed, scanning at bins and tracking of items, but not deleting, kind of stuff like that, right? And that's all part of the AI flow. We're not going to show that today. Okay, so we're going to choose worksheet. We're not going to create a lookup list in this case. We're just going to hard code our journal to be the default journal. And we'll look at that. So the next page of the wizard, so after you hit next there is what is the application code that you're going to create for it. So you just have to give it a unique name that doesn't already exist. So I'm just going to choose item journal. Journal, there. Okay, application title. When the application opens, what's the title displayed at the top of the page? We'll call it item adjustment. But I think our example is only going to be positive adjustments. And then whether or not you want to create a main menu option for it or a landing page. So what we're talking about here, it's going to reload this config here. All right. So we're talking down here is, do you want to have a icon displayed on this main landing page? You don't always have to, depending on what you're making. Maybe you're making an application using the wizard to be launched from something else. So let's say like you're on item inquiry and you want to launch an application that shows you like journal lines as an example of, or allows you to add or adjust, that item, via some sort of journal. So let me create this worksheet, but you don't want to be on the main page, but you're just going to launch it from the item inquiry application. But in our case, we do want to have it create a main page. So then you just have to give it a name for it or a caption. So we'll call it item adjust. And then give it an icon. You can just choose one from the list in here. So, let's just do the change quantity one. Hit next. Then just give you some options for worksheet types applications. So inserts, updates, deletes, whether or not you're going to require bins, and item tracking, whether or not when you insert or update lines, does it require lot serial, that kind of stuff. Right? Just because the item might be lot tracked doesn't mean your application always wants to record that kind of information. So we'll just leave all the defaults here leave all these options set to what they were by default, and we'll hit next. So then we get into the next page of the wizard, which is asking you, what do you want your header data to be? Header data isn't always required, depending what you're doing. In this case, it would be optional. We don't really need to see, the batch information at the top. We're really just looking at the item journal line. But we're going to use this field to actually indicate, just to let the top of the page, some of the information for the users. So I'm going to put in item journal batch. And for these examples today, I'm just going to be using the default prompts that come with the wizard. Okay, I'm not going to go off script. I'm just going to exactly copy whatever's in there. When you're making your own worksheet, obviously you're going to choose other specific tables, like the job planning lines or something like that. Whatever you're making, it'll be specific to that. You can use the lookup to go find the table you want and choose it there. You could also just type in the table number or the table name, like as we just did there. And then you have to filter, or optionally filter, that header data by some fields, right? So in our case here, I'm just going to, again, take the defaults. I'm going to put in this, copy and paste it in. So you can see here, we're defaulting, or we're filtering the batch name to default. If you look at what this is here, so when you do the editor, you can go and you can make more, you can change these things, add your fields, that kind of thing. So that's just all it's doing, is you can manually build it up yourself if you're not copy and pasting like I was, okay? But when we talk about the defaults, so this is hard-coded to default. If you want it to be a variable, all right, so maybe it's based on, you had a lookup list beforehand where you chose the batch name. This also accepts variable placeholders, right? So you put the brackets around it, and then you just put in the variable name. And for those that did the application development class, the variable names are exactly what you'd see in the page context, right? So that global page context. So it could be anything. It could be passed in from the batch. It could be like my variable name, right? Whatever it happens to be called, you can put in brackets, and this will get replaced at time of filtering to the variable that's on the page. If you were doing a lookup list, say prior to this, and that lookup list then was passing in just a standard name of the field from the journal batch, it might be, journal batch name. Oops, batch name, like that, right? So it could be, that it's just, it really depends on what you're doing or what you have passing into this page or available to the page, at least at the time. But for our case today, we're just going to accept that we're going to hard code everything to the default batch. Okay, we'll hit next. Then we get into the columns. What columns do we need to bring back from Business Central, or which fields do we need to bring back from Business Central? And then on the same vein, what fields do we want to display to the user? So we may have a bunch of data, but we, maybe you're putting it into the page context, but you don't actually need to show anything. You can use the add columns, and you can go and select the fields from that table. So in this case, the journal batch. And then you can choose whether it's visible or not, and the captions, that kind of stuff. There's options there for you. Or you can use the suggest defaults here. And the suggest defaults is just looking at the table and trying to, it'll use some of the ones that we've already predefined. So we have a bunch of tables in the AL code that we've already said, hey, like for this table, bring back these columns. These are what we expect, kind of stuff. For anything else that we don't have already one pre-mapped for you, it then tries to look at the field names or field captions, and then based on that, determine what they are and if we should show them. So like, example, say like line number. We associate it to the line number type column, and usually we don't show that, so we make it invisible. All right, stuff like that. Business Central is pretty standard that way, which is nice. Like, so most tables and even partners and vendors, we always create the same kind of thing. So it'll be line number, bin code, variant code. We usually use the same naming, so it's easy for it to sometimes find those defaults. If it can't find any defaults for you, or it doesn't determine the right ones, obviously you can create your own. And after the application's done and it's been created, you can still go back into that custom app that just got created and modify the columns yourself, add more columns, change them, hide the visibility, whatever you want to do. So you still have that kind of control over it. We're going to do suggest defaults. So with the click of a button, we now have these two columns that I've created. So journal template name, and this is the batch name here. We're going to hide the template, but we're going to show the batch name to the user at the top of the page. Okay, so you click next, and now you get into, well, where's your line data coming from? So in our case, it is the item journal line. So, or you could type in 83, right? And you get item journal line, do the lookup, and then you need to filter the line data by something. So in our case, we're putting in this filter here, and it's the same thing as the default header, not very unique, but we're just filtering all the lines where the batch name is default. Okay, hitting next. Now we need the line column. So again, this can get a little bit more involved. If you're doing the add columns, there's a few extra fields here because you need to map it up to, like, what does the line number, what field maps up to line number, what field maps up to bin code, that kind of stuff. And it's all part of that standard application development course we did. But you have the full option to do it here, but just same as it was on the header side of things, we have a suggest defaults, which again, we have some pre-mapped ones. And then if it can't find those, it tries to base it on field names on the actual table for the line. We'll do the suggest fields, and we got a whole bunch of things in there. So we got line number matching up to line bin code, variant code, quantity, unit measure, description. You can certainly add some more here, or after the fact, change it and go with that. So quick, we're just going to click next here. Then we get into fine line templates. For those of you that know, the fine line template is used for when you're scanning an item or a bin. It uses the fine line templates to match up the lines in the document or the worksheet to find a matching line based on what you scanned. So the default one it's suggesting here for you is bin item variant, and you get bin because on the first page of the wizard, you said you wanted to have bin tracking or bin scanning. So you get bin item variant, these things checked off. You can add more in here. So let's say you only wanted to have bin and item. So if the variant code doesn't match based on what they scanned, that's fine. Find any line that has that bin item combination and choose that line to update the quantity on. So you'd say yes here and yes on this one, right? And that's kind of how it cascades down into, you could have last one just being item. I don't care which bin they scanned. If there's an item on the worksheet that matches the item, use that line kind of thing. Again, if you decide you want to change this after the fact, you can go find the fine line templates in Business Central and modify them there. But we'll keep this as is. It looks fine to me. And then we get the menus. So what menus do you want to have available to the user when the application is created? There's some very standard specific ones we add in here. You can't add your own at this point. but you can go and add them after the application wizard's done. You can choose, not to show some of these ones. If you don't want to have enter bin, which is, a way for them to type in a bin code and pretend like they scanned it kind of thing, you could show that or hide that. Item inquiry, bin inquiry get launched from this worksheet. You're getting things like delete line, or again, enter bin 2, based on what you chose on this first page of the wizard. But we're going to leave these all just as is. Okay, and then we get into line values, and this is the last page of the wizard here. And line values, it may not be a good explanation here of what this is trying to say, but essentially there are cases where the application wizard doesn't know all the data it needs to know about handling a line. So if you're inserting a line or updating a line, there may be other data in there that isn't coming from the user prompt that still needs to be set, but the wizard has no idea that you needed it at all. So this is your chance to actually go ahead and create those values. So I'm going to hit the suggest fields because, again, it's got some predefined ones based on table names. But I'll do the suggest field, and this gives you an example of what we're talking about. So on a journal line, you need to set the document number usually. There's a number series option that can get defaulted in. But if you wanted to set the document number to something specific, you can. And again, we're using a variable placeholder here, so those brackets around the variable name. Config ID is just what would you expect. It'd be like the configuration ID in Business Central that you use. But again, if you've used the application development course, you'll know, you can take the page context, you can see all these variables and see what they are. Same thing, we're setting location code to the location code of the device because it wasn't inferred automatically by anything. And then posting date, we're setting to today's date. Okay, so anytime a line gets inserted or updated, we're setting these 3 additional fields based on these values here. Okay. Oh, and example, like, another one like here. So if I want to do positive or negative adjustments, like, you might have to set the entry type in here, to something specific. Okay, and then lastly, just saying, hey, well, we're done. Are you ready to create that application? And we will say, yes, we are. And there it is. So it created a new application for you. So item journal's name that we gave it. These are the menus that we said yes to. These are the columns that we chose to make. There are no fact boxes. It gave us a scan behavior by default. The 2 fine line templates that we created. And then there's one event that's associated with the handling of the getting of the item journal lines. Okay. If you go back out and I'm just going to show you the full list. I go full screen there. Okay, so let's look at the applications. So our item journal one is right there. That's the one we just created, and again, the full list there. If you design this, it'll look just like kind of like the template that we showed at the beginning. All these columns, all this data. You could then at your afterwards, you can go ahead and change these blocks and stuff, and we're going to expand this out at the very end there and just take a look at it. On the handheld side of things, so let's reload this configuration here. We now see our item adjustment application down at the bottom. Great, clicking on that. And there's our batch name we said we're going to show in the header. We have a bunch of menus that got created, and it's prompting us to scan a bin, so I will scan one. And then it said scan an item. I'll just do C100. Prompting for some values, and I'll hit 4. There, that's the item that got created. And just as an example, I'm going to create another one as well. I'm going to scan FF100. And I'll put 2 of those in there. Great. And, and if you were to scan C100 again, it's going to find the same line from above. And I'll say 2. And now instead of 4, we have 6 being added. And, proof is in the pudding kind of thing. So we'll look at the item journal. Oops. Right. And there's the 2 lines that got created for us. Pretty simple. And the device configuration code became the document number. You got your posting date, you got your item lines, that kind of stuff. what, 10 clicks, you've got an item, journal, adjustment applications, doing positive adjustments. In this case here, we have some other demos that Mark has done where you got, job planning lines, that kind of stuff. Pretty simple. Okay, so, that's the batch, the worksheet one. Creating a lookup application based on the base lookup application typically used to present, the selection choice, So if you're looking at receiving maybe a show list of the purchase orders that are available in the system, you choose the purchase order, then open up the document. If it doesn't support any line actions because you're not meant to interact with it at all, you don't delete the entries or anything like that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to skip that one for today, because we're going to cover the lookup and what it kind of looks like as part of creating a document application. So it's based on the base document one. So if we look at that there, so there's this one here, we did the base worksheet, and then there's base document right here. Okay, and it'll look a lot like the worksheet one, where it's just a bunch of blocks that are all collapsed and it's meant to handle document type applications. Similar, that base lookup one that we just kind of glossed over is right there. Typically, we're using the base the document flow in the application wizard to create things like a header lines type application. So sales orders, sales lines, purchase order, purchase lines, that kind of thing, right? So you can use that. Normally, you don't allow deleting of lines or adding lines to these documents, but it's not disallowed either. So you could use the document flow to add lines to a sales order, for example, right? But typically, it's just for updating line quantities on an existing document. And it's most often used in, when you're using a lookup type document. So let's try that through the wizard. So create app wizard. And we're going to choose document. And we are, in fact, going to use a lookup list in this case here. So we'll choose that option on. Give it a code. So we are creating a purchase order document, I believe is what the flow is going to ask us through. So we'll purchase order. We'll just call purchase order. Purchase order will be the title of the document when it opens up. And you can see it's trying to create a lookup list application for us as well automatically. So it appends this LL to the name of the application code that you specified above. It said because it's a document, it's got a lookup list, it assumes that you want a main menu as well, and it inferred from the application title what the name of the menu should, or the landing page menu should be. And we'll just go purchase orders. Menu icon, we have a receive one here. Let's just do that. Okay, and then you get back to the common options. Is what are the behaviors or the actions you want available on the purchase order, the document that you're making. So like I said, normally we don't have insert delete, but you could turn those back on. So we do want to scan bins, and we're going to keep item tracking off for simplicity's sake today. Then, no surprise, you got to choose the fields that you want. So 38 for purchase header, and then we're going to specify the filtering on it. So again, if you notice in here, we have document, I'll just bring this up. So we have document type set to order. So we're hard coding it to the document type of order. And our number field though is NO, probably doesn't need to be all uppercase, but NO period, which is the field that's going to come back from the lookup list. So when you choose something from the lookup list, it's going to pass a column, like all the columns from the selected line. And one of those columns is number, the number field, into your document application. And that's what we're going to use to filter the lines on and the header and lines for this document. So we'll hit OK. And then we're going to, you can add the columns for the header. So I'm just going to shortcut again, use the suggest defaults. So we have document type. We don't want to show that, but we know it's going to be type order because we hard-coded on the previous one. And we're going to show number at the top of the page and who the vendor is that we're buying this from. On the next page of the wizard, you have to define the lines that you want. So we can type in purchase line. This is why I copy and paste. Purchase line. And then how are we filtering the data there? So put that in and I'll just show the dialog. So again, document number, document type, and we are also going to filter out the lines to just type item. You might also have something in here where, you know, number is not equal to blank kind of stuff, because you might have just a comment line or something. But for today's example, just type is equal to item. Hit OK. Great. So now you filtered out your header and your lines. You define what the header and line tables are. And we have to give the columns for the lines. So I'm going to suggest defaults to save us a bunch of time today. So you can see a lot of things came in here. So document type, you know, it's fine. Line numbers, all these kind of things are default there. So we have extra quantity fields now. So quantity, quantity received, quantity to receive, outstanding quantity. You can see, you know, where the mapping to these things are, right? So in order for our applications to work, you need to know, well, what's the original quantity, how much are they, what's the quantity to update fields, or in this case, quantity to receive, and then, you know, how much was already received, you know, as part of the process prior to this. Won't bore you. Pretty standard if you're used to making applications yourself. This is all pretty common, pretty well documented. Hit next. It gave us some fine line templates. Out of the box, it suggested 2 for defaults here, so bin, item, variant, and then bin, item. We'll just accept those defaults, and then we get into the actions that could be available to you on the handheld. So a couple extra ones, you know, like not unusual. So we have deleting lines, not visible because it's not, you shows on the main page you didn't want to allow deleting, but you know, you could put this back in and say yes. But the extra ones that are kind of cool down here, we just have a take picture and a signature option as well. They're not shown by default, but you could re-enable them. And then suggest fields. All we're saying here, like there isn't much normally you need to add, and you may not even need this one here. So the line values, we're just saying it's possible that the bin code on the purchase order is blank by default. So maybe, you know, because it's not always required. Warehouse receipts would have a purchase a bin code, but purchase orders may not. So we're just saying, well, depending on what they've scanned, so the current bin is what's being scanned, we'll set that to the bin. We'll set that on the bin code, just in case. Next on that wizard didn't bring us to the finish page because on the original one, we said we wanted to create a lookup list as part of this flow. So now we're into the lookup list portion. This instruction at the top is just basically that. So at the top of the lookup list, you might say something like scan or choose the item that you, or choose the purchase order that you want to work on. So I'll just do that. Okay. And then it's saying, well, what application are you opening when you hit OK on your lookup list? In this case, it's purchase order. It's based on what we chose at the beginning, and it knew that. So we'll put it in for default for you. And then we have the table that it's based on. So we have purchase header. And then what are our filters? So we are not filtering anything other than just type order. You know, you might have where completed equals, or completely shipped or completely received equals false, that kind of stuff, or maybe only assigned to a certain user. You can put more filters in there. That's up to you. And then we're going to suggest some columns for it. Nothing unusual. I expect to see number and vendor number, but maybe assigned user as well. And then we're now on the last page of the wizard, which is saying, hey, we're going to create these 2 applications for you. Last chance. Do you want to go back and make some more changes? No, we don't. We'll hit finish. And there we go. We have our 2 applications that got created. So the document and then the lookup list. Just what you expect to see, all the columns, you know, menus, fine line templates, scan behaviors, all get generated for you, just like they were on the document side of things. So let's take a look at that got created there for us, and we will do a reload configuration. And we should see it down here. So there's the one that we just got created. And a list of all the purchase orders that are in the system from our lookup list. And there's our prompt that we said we wanted to have. By default, when you're creating a lookup list, you get the search box here at the top and these 2 menu actions by default. So if I choose one of those, sure, first one seems fine. Hit choose. Okay, so there. So now we have at the top, we have our document number. Our buy from vendor is, you know, Cola Technologies. The lines that came in, it's telling us to scan a bin, scan an item. You know, so if I do scan a bin, so S-01-001, So I'm scanning that bin, and if I change the quantity on that one, I'm just going to hit change quantity. I hit 3. You see we got our quantity received got set to 3, and it did set the bin code to S01 because we had on that line values of the wizard there. We said, well, anytime we update a line, we want to set it to the current bin code. All right, so you get that kind of behavior in there, and everything else just flows just like you would expect on any of our other applications, right? So you get your open quantity, that kind of stuff. What it doesn't have, and same as the worksheet, is it doesn't have something like post. All right, so if you expected to be able to post this document from here, you're going to have to go and create a new post menu action and then write some AL code to do the posting for you. Which is, you know, a problem, but you can see the power of the wizard there. Like, it's just with X number of clicks and some just basic knowledge of what, you know, the tables that you're planning to create, you can use that wizard to generate a fully working application for you. So it does bring us though into, you know, how to extend that a little bit further when you get into situations where the app wizard wasn't just wasn't quite enough for you and you wanted to take it a little bit further, but you don't really want to have to delve into making a whole new application from scratch. Okay, so let's take a look at the application that got created, and we'll take a look at the document one. That's fine. What's that? Okay, so if we look at the purchase order one that we just got created there, so the purchase order document. If we go design that, most of the magic, and this applies to the worksheets, anything we talk about here is, you know, on the worksheet side of things. It's just an introduction to a little bit of the Blockly here and taking a look at what's happening. Most of the magic for these application generated wizards happens in this when the form opens. So I'm going to expand this block. Actually, I'll expand all blocks. All right, so we'll ignore everything off to the right. We don't really care what's going on there. So what we really want to see is what's happening in here. So, you know, if you're used to building the applications, you know, you'll know that these are the variables and we're setting some things, right? So we have things like insert allowed, delete allowed. You know, that's, you know, you chose those on the first page of the wizard. We're setting some global variables for this application so it knows when it goes to check, say, well, do I allow inserts? Yes. Oh, okay, then I can do something. You know, these are the table fields that we set. So header table, line table ID, we set those IDs in there because we're using those variables again further on in the application when we do placeholder replacements for some of the filtering and that kind of stuff. You know, init line values. So again, we said we want to set the bin code to current bin. Well, we set this variable var init line values to this. That's getting used on the AL backend and saying, oh, I got this, and it parses it up based on a comma separated string, and it says, okay, well, for every key value pair within this, go and set those fields. So it finds a field called bin code and then sets it to the variable current bin. Right? It's doing all that for you behind the scenes, but this is what this is essentially trying to tell you. Is like we're just populating this application designer stuff, which is really just an XML text file behind the scenes stored as a blob. And then at runtime, it's parsing some of these values out and using those in conjunction with the designer workflow and the backend to achieve the results that you expected, right? So no item tracking. You will often see things like, you know, 444, 333, you know, like all these weird numbers. You're like, well, what is that? And you're like, well, why doesn't it just set to false? It just comes down to it was hard. It was difficult to find the actual variables within the XML of this Blockly stuff that got created, and then replace it with actual values. It was easier to find a hard-coded string like 444444 within the text than it was to actually use this. So we're just kind of cheating and using that to make it easier to find nodes within that document behind the scenes to do some of the placeholder replacements. That's all it really is. It's just saying, like, you know, we're setting this and then we're doing this and we're setting some value to that. So not a lot of magic going on there, and then we have some filters and some replacements. So again, when you're looking at your documents and you want to extend it after the fact, most of the code, you know, for the trickery or at least the initial configuration setup of your document or your worksheet is happening when in this on form opens. When we talk about what we're doing with or how we're getting some of the data or updating with the data, this is where we get into those generic events. So event 750, and then if we look over here at align update, it'll be over here. I don't want to scan an item. It'll be update line data going. I'll find it. There we go. Okay, so 751. So when we're updating a line, we're calling event 751. Now there's a bunch of stuff that goes on in here, and you can change these things. If you're extending these applications, so let's say come back to that example where we said we wanted to add, alternate unit of measure on the line every time we updated a line. So we had some alternate unit of measure we calculated, and we want to put it into the line as well when we're updating it. You can certainly come in here and you can add your extra blocks. You could actually, add an extra couple blocks in here to get the alternate unit measure, or maybe it's part of the quantity dialog and you had a quantity extension override that got the alternate unit measure. However, updating event 751, while possible, and if you've done the application override session with us, you'll know that you can extend any event. So you could extend event 751 and add your extra field in there. But because it's shared across all custom applications, I don't suggest you probably use it. You can. I'm not saying you won't, but because if you created another application and using the wizard, they're both going to use 751, and then you have to have weird flags to toggle between the behavior of those two. It might be easier just in this case here, just go and, pass it in your own ID number, to the 2 million, whatever. You say, well, I'm going to call event 2 million instead. That, and in your 2 million event, then you handle creation or update of the line or whatever it is that you're doing. In this case, it's update line. Handle updating line and setting the alternate unit measure. And you can still copy the code from event 751 and put it all within 2 million. I just normally wouldn't suggest you try to override or extend event 751 itself. At that point, if you have to do something special, just create your own brand new event for it. Okay, same thing. So if we get out of this, so that's just, talking about extending it there. I'm going to count that. I want to save that. If you do need to add new menus, and I'm just going to go here and go to configure. All right, so we talked about, extending it a little bit further, like posting as an example, right? So let's say you do want to have post. All right, so you can go here, you add this new menu, and you can give it an icon. You can say, I'm going to call it the post menu. Where's the post icon? So that one, hit post, and your standard action, you can create. So I'm going to custom application event. And again, if you've been part of the development course, this is all old news, but event name, so my on post. You don't have to create an override or anything to do this because this is your own custom application. So you have a my on post, and then you can design this. Come in here and create your own custom event. Right, and then so now your menu option is going to call my on post, and then you would come in here and you'd add your code or your blocks in order to handle posting. Right, so again, just trying to extend it, something like your actions would be like run event. It starts with an R. There we go, run event, and it might be a custom, well, obviously it will be a custom one, unless you're using one of ours, so 2,000,001. And then you'll have code inside your custom extension, AL extension code unit, to handle posting of this purchase order document. Yeah, so that's the whirlwind tour of using the application developer. Again, we talked about, it's difficult to extend, insert, update lines using our AL extension code unit. So if you are getting into the case where you have to change the behavior slightly for this, better to just implement your own extension. And that's it. Hope you got some value out of today's session. And yeah, well, go use the Application Wizard and provide any feedback you have through the support channel. We're always open to suggestions. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content, and remember to hit that bell icon to stay updated. See you in the next video.